Hey everyone, thanks for joining for another episode of the Brilliant Ones podcast with me, your host, Donnie Adams, where I speak with entrepreneurs and the companies they build. Have a special guest joining me today, Abu Sadeq, CEO and founder of Zartech. Abu, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thing about the day is, it's a lot going on when it comes down to cybersecurity. And your company, cybersecurity consulting firm is has grown rapidly over the past couple years, and definitely want to dive into that. And as we speak on that, but I really want to learn more about your story, right? And you being, you grew up here in Dallas, and speak about, what got you into IT.
Sure. So I landed here in Dallas about back in 1990. I went to UT Dallas to study. My original course was in finance and accounting. And then after graduation, I worked 5 years as an accountant, corporate accountant, and I did not like it at all, doing credits, debits, and credit all the time. I did not find it to be creative. So I went back to school at night and did my master's in MIS and did a lot of the took a lot of the classes like software development and all those things. And then after graduation, I applied for to a company called Alcatel. They were pretty big and huge at that time, and I got hired as a programmer analyst. So I started at the trenches, and then over my career, I went up the ladder all the way to a CIO position for a global oil and gas company. So over time, I did a lot of things, from software programming to managing large implementation project for different organization, and so on.
Wow. And so even during your journey when you were getting, getting your master's in IT, at what point did you know that you were going to go into IT security, right? Because IT is so big, right? It's so, huge from not only from a sales perspective, but from a development standpoint. But there's so many ways you can kind of go into. What made you choose security?
Very good question. So security is the last area I wanted to be in because it's a lot of headache
Right.
and a lot of responsibility. If you are the head of information security for organization and they have a major breach, that means you're going to be out of a job because it was your responsibility to protect.
Right.
So I see myself as an accidental person in the security space. Um, in my role as a chief information security officer of our organization, I also had a dual responsibility for information security. And so I learned the hard way how to go and protect the organization, their infrastructure, the data they have in there, and understood how to protect. And during my career at several organizations, we had security issues. So I learned the hard way how to go and do all of those. So back in 2016 is when I decided that since I'm very passionate about helping organization, this is one area that I want to go and help organization because security is a big problem worldwide. It costs about $1 trillion. This is from companies spending in security and then also having to pay out ransomware. So $1 trillion is a lot of money. And if you look at the stats, the small to mid-sized business, those are the ones that once they have a major breach are going out of business because they are not able to afford to pay. So while I was doing security for several organizations, I found that there might be an easier way to help this organization. So we went and built a software solution. So we named our solution Cyberator. Basically, what it does is it can look at an organization's entire security program in terms of how they're leveraging people, process, and technology, and it understands the gap. And then based on the gap, it helps them remediate all the actions they need to take to be more secure. A good way to explain this is I try to use the iceberg analogy. So if you look at the iceberg, the majority of the mass is underwater, and we don't see a lot of the mass that's over the water. So in security, organization are addressing what they can see in terms of the cyber risk, which is above the water. What our software does is helps them understand all the other areas that they may be neglecting or maybe siding them. So this could be security controls not in place or ineffective. It could be security awareness training that they're missing. It could be other processes that are not there. So that's where our software that we built helps organization address those.
No, that's a good way to tackle, especially as I mentioned, it's a lot of stuff is going on with just ransomware, a lot of attacks. So how does your solution help with, alongside existing security protocols that most, maybe SMB customers have, which I'm assuming that's what you're focusing on. Is it mid-market or are you working on the enterprise level? What is your sweet spot for your solution?
We build the solution to be industry and geolocation agnostic as well as size.
Mhm.
So our tool has this profiling engine in it, so it can profile the organization, for example, based on the location, the industry they are in, the size, and it tailors itself. So, for example, if it's a US based company in healthcare industry and accepts credit card, what it will do is it will pull in the regulations, frameworks that tie to, for example, healthcare industry has to comply with HIPAA.
Right,
If you're accepting credit card, you have to comply with the PCI DSS.
right.
So it pulls all those standards and then it pulls in some of the best security frameworks that's out there and takes that and it aligns it to the organization to see how the organization is conforming to those best standards. And then it rates them. So our software will give them a score very similar to the FICO score. FICO score helps the lender understand the risk of lending money to an individual. With
Right.
our score, the organization understands what kind of risk they have in terms of having a cybersecurity breach. And our software also comes up with a prioritized remediation plan. So this organization can take that and within a short time address the gaps they have and improve their security.
Oh, so right once they get that report, kind of like a credit card report, right? And from there, they could take a look at um exactly what security what where security actions that they need to take place. Now, from once they see this sheet, does your organization come in and say, "Hey, do you all partner with maybe other third party security firms that can help specifically these issues?" So, like for an example, maybe there's an issue going on with their firewall. Is your organization say, "Hey, we have an existing partner that we work with and we can assist this," or does your organization can fix that gap?
Very good question, also. So, in the full blown report that they get, it also has, as I mentioned, a prioritized action plan. So, it will prioritize, okay, which are the items that they need to tackle first would have the biggest impact. And anything that requires the technology, our report will include set of vendors that can help them. We can help them in some cases, but most of them we cannot. That's not our expertise. So we do offer, and we are pretty neutral on these vendors. We say, okay, these are 5 different vendors out there that can help you address each of these areas.
Right. No, and speaking of, you talk about addressing what actions to tackle, right? In the SMB world, right? These small business owners, they have they're constrained on budgets, right? It's budget's important. How important is them to prioritize security in today's world?
It is very, very important because these bad guys, the bad actors who are making a living off hacking companies, they know this smaller organization don't have a team or don't have software solution in place to protect them. So they go after these companies more. And so they use different techniques like phishing campaigns where they will send in malicious email for the employees to click on, and that's what downloads their malware and for them to do a ransom attack.
Right.
Yeah. So because of the limited resources, these companies are very, very vulnerable. And so one of the things we try to do is we also tell them, okay, um, there is alternative ways instead of buying state of the art software. There is open source software that you can leverage for free, and we also tell them step by step how to go and fix it on their own. So one of the stats we saw that when we did an analysis of all the data breaches or ransomware attacks that were happening, 80% of them are very quick fixes. The top one is due to human error. Human error is, for example, employees not being trained, they don't have the security awareness. So training the employees so that they're aware of not clicking on a malicious link, and then having a strong password. And then the other recommendation we get them is a multi-factor authentication. So in addition to having a password, also use a secondary form of authentication. And then the process, which is you have your firewall, you have your software, those needs to be patched as soon as there's a vulnerability that's out there. Just by doing this top three things, they can address 80% of the cyber risk.
And what's funny that you say that is I know a small organization that actually underwent a huge ransomware attack, and it jeopardized them a lot because it slowed business down and it had a huge impact on their customers. I mean, a lot of the customers were also because it dealt with PCI, and so it was a huge jeopardizing when you're talking about people's credit card information. I mean, how are you seeing, some of these hackers and what should people be, as we spoke about like phishing attacks, right? Phishing emails that come in right through emails. What should these small business to medium sized business pay attention to just so they know to avoid, right? Because you like you mentioned, they don't have a huge IT staff or maybe even an IT manager, right? I'm just maybe I'm a bakery, right, somewhere, and I don't have the time to really put, hire a huge security presence. I'm cool with getting, a Cisco Meraki device, and I think I'm safe. But in that sense, how do you stay continue to stay protected, and what things to avoid?
Um, so, as I mentioned, the number one would be having a very strong security awareness program in place.
Right.
So, train the users on different kind of threats the organization can face. Do at least on a monthly basis or maybe in a quarterly basis phishing campaigns.
Mhm.
And so good example of a phishing campaign I have seen at different clients is the first time they launch a campaign, they see that there is 30% click rate on this phishing emails that go out to the
Right.
employees. And so when they click on the employees, it shows that on there that, hey, you shouldn't, this if this was a real um, phishing attack, this would have damaged the organization. So then they have them watch a security awareness training.
Right.
So over time, once they keep doing this, they were able to reduce the 30% click rate all the way down to 7%.
Wow.
So that's a huge improvement,
Yeah. No, for sure.
right? And this doesn't cost that much money at all. And then the other training would be being socially aware. Some of the big attacks happened. We see the hackers, when we think about a hacker, we see a bunch of guys sitting behind computers
Right.
writing script to attack.
Yeah.
But we have found from case studies that some of the hackers, they wear expensive suits, Rolex watches, high-end cars, and they frequent high-end restaurants, bars, and where they target potential employees who are executives within companies. And through different kind of social engineering, they try to understand information that they can use leverage to do the attacks. And they have done that and use that information to hack into these companies. So uh, making the organization aware, security awareness training, and then, as I mentioned, keeping up to date with the latest patches, that will be a big difference.
Right. So, and my theory is, are hackers working a typical job? Are they typically working a 9 to 5, and they might do some hacking at night? Or what do you think is the ideal life of a hacker? Or anyone can be a hacker per se.
Uh, this is a very good question again. From what we found is right now anyone can be a hacker,
Right.
and it doesn't cost that much money. So all you have to do is download one of the Tor browsers and go on the dark web, and you will see that hacking tools are now being offered as a software as a service. So you pay a yearly fee and you get access to latest and greatest hacking tools out there. It's not that very expensive, and then you download them, and then you can start hacking. And it's very easy for somebody to use a proxy server or something and go after organization. and and the money is out there so much that you have large organization who operate. I have even seen organizations, these hacking organizations, they have HR department, customer service. For example, when you get a ransom attack, the screen that pops up, it says that if you need any help with cryptocurrency transfer, give us a call and we will walk you through it.
Wow. You know, another thing that's getting hacked is social media profiles. Last year, I actually experienced like a ransomware attack on my social media account. So unfortunately, I didn't have two factor authentication set up. So they were able to get my password, and then they added a whole bunch of pictures, put on stories, and said a whole bunch of stuff, pretty much asking like my followers to give them money and so forth. And I used another account to talk directly with the hacker, and he wanted money, and he was just like, "Give me money, and I'll get your account back." I was this close to giving him some money, I was just like, you know what, it's not worth it. I'll just create a whole new profile. So I think social media is something that I see a lot of hacking. Like I know a few friends of mine over the past year, they experienced the same thing.
Oh yeah, social media attacks are happening left and right.
Right.
I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
The other area of concern I see is um, companies using IoT devices. So by IoT I mean devices that have is Wi-Fi enabled, and they're using in their houses.
Hmm.
So right now we see people have Wi-Fi enabled refrigerators in their house, washing machine, their vacuum cleaner, everything. You may be wondering, okay, what's the problem with that? But let me give you a scenario. So let's say you hooked up your refrigerator to the Wi-Fi network and you get hacked for some reason. So somebody's monitoring and they monitor your refrigerator and they see that you haven't opened it for several days. So that tells them, okay, this guy is out of the house vacationing. This is a good time to go and do burglary. And also, all these IoT devices, the firmware, it doesn't get updated as we do on our own laptops. So those are kind of weak. So they use a mechanism on going into those IoT devices and then hacking into other devices like workstations. There was a casino in Las Vegas who got hacked. They were hacked from a thermometer that was in the fish tank. That's how the hackers got into their
Wow.
network.
These hackers are pretty smart.
Yeah,
It's just unbelievable how smart. It just bizarres me how smart people can get, and just the little things that we take for granted. And especially in today's age, we're going to see a continuous increase in IoT devices, and it's making sure that those items stay protected.
definitely, definitely.
So,
My recommendation on the IoT devices at home is create a different V line for your home. Have kind of a guest network separate, and on the separate guest network, attach all your IoT devices and use the other network for your workstations or your phones.
right. So now going back to Zartech, I read that you bootstrap
Yes.
the company, and is it in maybe you can kind of go into that as well, but have you received any outside funding as well, or it's still 100%
We are
funded
still
yourself?
100% bootstrapped,
Wow.
and um, so some of the problem we faced was location Dallas wise. There's not too many venture capital here.
Hmm.
You need good connection to be the venture capital. That was one challenge I faced, and then the other challenge when I talked to a few of the angel investors that single founder uh, led startups is not attractive. They see as a risk,
Right.
and then I had enough capital to move and have an MVP out there. So we launched our first version, and we were able to get paid customers. And the other way we were also able to fund ourselves is we started offering some cybersecurity services, consulting services that has been paying. So then we were able to go up, get more paid customers and grow that way organically. But the challenge now I'm facing is the cybersecurity market is extremely saturated and very crowded.
Yeah.
Every company out there is heavily funded.
Right.
They spend so much money in marketing, and so we are kind of getting squeezed on the corner. And so we have to raise capital. That's what we have decided.
Right. Yeah. I didn't know that. I know Austin is full of a lot of VCs. And that's a growing area full of like so many tech startups. How is the scene out here in Dallas?
It is not. So we got really excited when Capital Factory first opened their doors here.
Hmm.
And then during COVID, they shut it down, that operation.
Right.
And then recently, they just opened up again. So, but investment wise, what we have found is Dallas is not a good spot.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a few friends of mine. They raised some money through some VCs out in Austin as well as Houston. Houston has started this tech incubator. They have a few out there, but it's one called the Ion.
Hmm.
There's a few VC firms in there, and it's been a great resource for upcoming entrepreneurs looking to kind of get guidance. And so throughout the week, very similar to Capital Factory, they have like different showcases, different meetups, pitch competitions for founders, different classes and workshops that you can kind of help growing your skills as a founder. And with some organizations like Capital Factory, how have you been able to utilize their resources to grow Zartech?
Um, so from their operation, we have been part of Capital Factory since 2019.
Hmm.
And we have not found that much help in terms of going and getting investors.
Hmm.
So again, with that
Even
being
from outside investors, I'm not, even excluding investors. I'm just talking about in general of just getting the word out. Maybe I don't know if you have a board of directors or advisors that you work with, right? What resources have Capital Factor provided you as far as growing um, Zartech?
Capital Factory has a slew of mentors.
Mm,
So all the companies who are involved with Capital Factory, they can take advantage of those mentors,
yeah,
and then based on their preference, they can bring them as advisors. Um, Zartech, we do have a Capital Factory mentor who is an advisor for us. Um, so coming back to our raising funds, uh, we are very lean because we have not raised money. So what we found that raising capital is a full-time job. So it
yeah,
diverts us from growing, helping our customer, growing the software, building the software more out. So we decided, okay, let us organically grow and secure our customers, grow our revenue to where we are very, very attractive. And then the uh, investors will
yeah.
come
Of
to
course.
us. That's the approach we took, and we are heading that way.
No, that's great. So early on, once you got the MVP rolling, you had automatically start reaching out to a few folks. I'm assuming you did validation, right? Did you go to a validation period where you say, "Hey, this is something that I know you all need," and would you all, how much would you all pay for it, right? How did that process come about?
Exactly like you said. So I first ran the idea by a couple of peers who have been doing security much longer, and they're much smarter than me. Um, so out of the two people, I ran the idea. One was like, "Yeah, this is a great idea. You should run with it." The other person said he was having a hard time uh, understanding how to monetize this. So they recommended I do a focus group, and they helped me with the focus group. We invited about 25 individuals who are potential users of the software, and we had a good participation. Almost 14, 15 people showed up in there. So I explained them, and the initial idea was based on 10, 20% of what the software does right now, which is the risk assessment. So through a PowerPoint, I gave them an idea about the software solution, and then I circulated a questionnaire asking them What do you think about this? Would you buy it for your organization? If you would, how much will you pay for it? And then how much, what functionality do you think is missing? And overwhelmingly, the response was good. So that gave us some validation to move forward. In fact, when we first launched, one of our first customer was one of the focus group attendee.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow. That came full circle around really quickly.
yeah.
So how long did it take you to develop the software?
Uh, we, so our software is kind of huge right now. It has 10 different modules.
Mhm.
So we started developing about 5.5 years ago, and we are constantly upgrading, tweaking it, and making it better because we are embedded in with several clients. So we see how they're using the software. How can we measure? So we are constantly tweaking and making improvements to it.
Right. And so you spoke about obviously the cybersecurity market is getting saturated, right? How does your solution, right, the 10 modules that you all have developed and you can continue to work on the solution, how is there any competitors that are doing exactly what you're doing, right? Do they have a cyber radar? And 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 what things are you doing to differentiate yourself from them?
Um, so in cybersecurity, if you break it down on the different categories, we fall under the risk management category: governance, risk, and compliance.
Hmm.
So our software helps with the risk assessment piece. Um, so in this space, there are several players out there who has GRC solution. But what we do is, you can say we built a much better mousetrap. Um, these existing solutions that's in the market, they cost tons of money and it takes a lot of ramp up time.
Yeah.
Some of the bigger solution even takes a month and a half. The way we built our solution is the without writing a single line of code, we can get a new client on board in just like a day or two, and
Wow.
they can use software. And so a lot of the things are programmed in, and the way it goes in and does a risk assessment of an organization is very, very unique.
Hmm.
So if you look at the traditional approach of doing a risk assessment for a company, you would go in and interview a ton of people, look at their data center,
Right.
look at their process, everything.
Takes time.
It takes time. And
Yeah.
then once you have the data, then what you have to do is align that to the framework standards. So in our software, what we did exactly the same thing, but we automated. We have the logics built in. We have some AI in there.
Hmm.
So that's how we have taken something that takes 2 weeks down to just a few hours.
All right. So how does your software does it touch on vendor risk management as well?
It does.
Okay.
It does. It has a module in there for vendor risk management.
Okay.
So um, good example would be one of the clients. They were doing vendor risk management manually. They had Excel spreadsheet with a lot of the assessment questions,
Yeah.
and they had two full-time resources that they were using. The resource would, whenever they have a new vendor to onboard, they would send out the assessment questionnaire, look at the vendor response, and then determine if there's any risky items to. We automated that whole piece. So, well, if you're a new client and you have, let's say, 800 vendors, all we need is an Excel spreadsheet with the vendor names list, and our software parses through it and creates a profile for those 800 vendors. Next step for you would be to create a campaign, and you select all the vendors and then hit start. The software sends email out to every single 800 vendors and then sends them a link to the assessment. And there's a video that the vendor can watch, 30-second video of how to go and complete one of the assessments. And the assessment is very, very, how do I say, it's a very, very engineered to go and understand the entire security program. Once the vendor completes it, um, for our client, it creates a dashboard and then tells, okay, how did the vendor score, similar to the FICO score,
Right.
and then it brings up to the top what are some of the items that our software found that needs to be addressed. So then our clients using our software um, responses back to those areas to the vendor saying, hey, we need you to address these or provide additional information. So they use the tool to collaborate back and forth and then bring it to closure. And the campaigns can be set up on a periodic basis. So let's say you want to do it on a yearly. So when you set it up initially, you can say, I want it done yearly. Next year, it automatically triggers and does all those.
Oh wow. So, well, it's a cheat now. But when I got my background's enterprise software sales. So when I got started, a couple years back, I sold a vendor risk management software for
Oh,
a
okay.
large financial institution. So yeah, very very. Our solution was exactly like how you described. We had a vendor survey that they would complete. Right, we called it a survey, not an assessment, and they'll complete the survey. And then one of the things that we had in our tool too gave the opportunity for a vendor to upload, their insurance policies, the ISOs, all those documents that we took. So is that the same
Ours
case?
does too.
Oh,
Yes,
okay.
ours does too. So the use case that I was giving you for that client, so it was taking them 4 hours to do one
Yeah,
assessment. So by using our software, they were able to reduce the headcount as well as cost-wise and reduce the time.
yeah. Vendor risk management is important,
It is.
especially because it's especially organizations that have your data as well, and making sure that they're not, if they're hacked, it's not doesn't jeopardize your business. And it's something that you just don't want to happen. And especially in today's age, like you mentioned, a lot of it is still done manually, and a lot of small organizations are doing vendor risk management, manually using an Excel sheet, right? And they're just managing that way. They're not thinking about all the, the risks that can come associated with just doing business with a third party.
Exactly. Exactly. Um, a lot of the latest breaches that happen is to third parties.
Yeah, there was a huge breach that's happened uh, through a third party. I don't know. Was it? It was. Do you know who? I'm trying to
I
think.
know, but I'm drawing a blank now on the
Yeah, I'm
name.
trying to bring up Blink too. Oh man. It uh
SolarWind.
SolarWind.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think it was SolarWind, but it just happened recently.
SolarWind happened last year,
Okay.
but it was a big deal because a lot of their product was thousands of companies,
Yeah.
and the hacker, the way that it happened was hacker was able to embed their code within SolarWind.
Uh-huh.
So when SolarWind pushed out their patch, it went with the bad code in there.
Yeah.
So it affected tons of companies out there.
Wow. That has to take a very sophisticated hacker. I'm assuming, right? That's not someone who can just go on and download a torrent software by hacking as a service platform and just go after a large organization like SolarWinds, right? That
You
takes years.
you laugh how they got into it. It came down to a bad password. It was like SolarWind 123 or something like that was the password.
Yeah. Wow. And it did jeopardize a whole huge
They were
company.
able to get into their system. Yeah.
Yeah. But even to pull off larger attacks, there was another one in Atlanta. It was a company that's based out of Atlanta. Was it a credit card company or I think it was a credit card company. I'm not sure. But they were hacked. And even with some of these big organizations, do these really take sophisticated hackers to kind of really get some of these large organizations? I think Uber was just hacked, right? Like,
Uber was
yeah,
hacked.
Uber was
Yes.
hacked. So are these hackers really that sophisticated, or is just someone who's just like, oh, let me go download the torrent software and hope this
No, they are
platform
not.
works?
They are not. They're not
Yeah.
sophisticated at all. Um, um, so I had a call from an attorney, and reason he called me was that one of his client email system was hacked, and the hacker went into the email system and read through every single email, and they figure out this company is a nut exporter from Mexico, and they would buy, export in, and then sell it. So they figure out who the buyers and sellers were. So using their email system, they sent an email to the buyer saying, "Hey, we changed our bank. Going forward, for any purchase you make, send the money here." And they about $1.5 million worth of purchases were transaction happened, and the money went to the. So soon the seller figured out something was wrong, so they reached out to the buyer and asked them, why haven't been paying us? And the seller goes, no, we have been paying for all your invoices. And then they found out this was the situation.
Oh man, that's horrible. That's crazy. And what's so funny is something like that is happening like pretty much every day, probably.
And 99% of this information of these breaches, hacks, is not publicly disclosed because it has a reputation hit.
Hmm.
And then the government doesn't require you to disclose it unless it impacts consumer data. So by consumer data, it could be healthcare patient information,
Hmm.
could be credit card information, or PII, personally identified information. If it impacts any of those, then the organization are forced to disclose this. Otherwise, majority of this information we don't hear is happening.
You know what? So now our organizations really they have to. What about small? It doesn't matter the size of the organization either if they're hacked at all too.
Smaller and mid-size, as I mentioned, they are more targeted.
Right.
They shouldn't think that they're not vulnerable. They shouldn't think that we are not big enough for the hackers to come after us. So they should actually start giving importance to cybersecurity and slowly beef up their posture.
Yeah. So or is your organization calling on a lot of small to medium sized business? Like, do you have a designated sales team that's focusing on?
We have a very small team.
Hmm.
One of the things we faced small organization that when we call them, they say we don't have a budget.
Right.
Yeah. So we go after mainly mid to large size organization.
Right. Yeah, of course. So are you is it more so an inside sale or is this more so a outside sale where of course everything's changed now, everything's virtual now, but is it what's the typical sales cycle look like?
Um, so in our short tenure, we have seen some sales. We have been fortunate enough to have a very small sales cycle, and some uh, that does require, for example, if it's a state entity or a school, those do require a lengthy, because they have to go through budget approvals. In some cases, our sales cycle is very small.
Yeah.
And to answer your other question, we are actually concentrating more on the inside sales um, and versus the outside sales.
Yeah. Yeah, because it seems like an easier business model too, just because it's just pretty simple. I'm assuming you do a demo. Do you do a demo with all 10 modules, or you do a demo with based on what you got out of the customer during the discovery phase?
Um, the other challenge here is if we try to do some discovery questions with the organization, because it's security, they don't want to open up.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we try to do a story when we do our demo.
Uh huh.
And in our story, we try to walk them through what are some of the pain points the organization went through, because a lot of the modules was actually built based on feedback from security leaders, risk management leaders, and we added them in there. So we walk through some of the pain points that organization went through, and then we say, okay, our solution helps address this in this area. And within 20 minutes time, we give them the higher level overview, and they have a specific interest in a specific module. We do a deep dive.
Mm, gotcha.
And so enterprise sales, again, getting qualified folks who are good they cost a ton of money. So that's another setback for us.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm assuming, of course, you're dealing with typically how many stakeholders are you dealing with when it comes down to making like a buying decision?
Not a whole lot.
Okay.
Because if we can talk with the
The CISO,
right decision maker, CISO, or
yeah, or IT manager or information security officer or so forth.
right. If we are talking to the right person, it doesn't take that long.
Yeah.
And we didn't price our solution that high, so it's a very affordable. So if they see a value, they say, "Yep, let's go." So the quickest sale that we made was in 1 day.
Yeah. Wow. One day solution. They were like, yeah, this is a no
Enterprise
brainer, right?
solution, yes.
Yeah, I need this right now. Sign me up. And the neat part about it is you have such a great short implementation. Like you say, you get clients onboarded in what, like a day, 2 days or so.
Yeah.
So was it like that when you initially rolled out the MVP, or is you be able to fine tune it over time?
So the way, yeah, to answer your question, yes.
Okay.
Very beginning, the way we built our solution is that it's a cloud-based solution, so it should not take a lot of customization. And then, we build that profiling engine,
Mhm.
as I mentioned earlier. So when they're going in to do a risk assessment on the organization, the tool automatically profiles and customize itself.
Yeah. So I'm assuming every entrepreneur has this story, right? In the early days when you were, launching your MVP, what were some of the challenges that you had with customers that you were experiencing that were like, okay, I have to figure this out somehow, right? What were some of those challenges?
Um, Number one challenge is financial, obviously,
Yeah, of course.
working with a very small team. So uh,
And you left you were a CISO,
I was CIO,
CIO. I'm
right,
sorry, at a really big company, and you left that to pursue Zartech,
right,
right?
right.
Right?
So my boss at home was not happy,
Yeah.
and and, and even the other day, because we have not been taking much money out of the company,
Uh-huh.
so I take a bare minimum as like any founder does.
Right.
So she had a conversation with me just a few days back and said, "When are you going to get serious and get a real job?" Because she had to make a lot of sacrifices on her side
Right.
because we had to cut down a lot of her cost,
Yeah.
household cost, and cut down on vacation. She had maid services, so we canceled those. So we had to adjust ourselves.
So what made you want to make this pivot in becoming a founder? I mean, a lot of people, right, are working the corporate ladder to get up to a CIO position, to a CEO position, right, COO. And you get to this you spent your career to get to this point. What happened in you that made you say, "You know what? I want to found my own company."
So I'm not, as you can understand, I'm not originally from the US.
Mhm.
I'm originally from a country in Bangladesh, and I came here to study. So this country has been great to me, and one of the reasons I wanted to give back. So I wanted to build this company that will give the opportunity for a lot of new jobs here locally. So that was one of the main reason was uh, creating a company that's going to grow and offer a lot of jobs at the same time being able to help the smaller mid-sized companies more. um, so this is not my first startup. 30 33 years ago, um, with three other friends, we opened a French bakery back in Bangladesh. And similar to Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, our bakery was in a garage.
Uh-huh.
It's a pastry shop. So I ran it with them for a couple of years. I still own 25% of it. And they ran it and they grew it into a chain restaurants.
Mhm.
So they have like seven of them. We employ almost 200 employees. So something we opened in our garage is now feeding 200 families.
Wow.
So that, when I think about it, gives some satisfaction. So I
Right.
wanted to redo this now.
Mhm. What was it like in those early days coming here to the US when you first got here?
Um, Not knowing anyone here in Dallas, so
Uh-huh.
that was
Well,
a
how
challenge.
well, how old were you at this point when you first got to
I When
Dallas?
I came here, I was 25.
You were 25. So what made you choose Dallas?
When I did my research on picking a university, I wanted to pick one that um, was reasonably ranked,
You right?
and then I also, because I paid for my own studies, so I wanted to pick a university that was within a city limit, so I could get a job. And then the one of the biggest factor I looked at was the cost.
And this was to get your bachelor's, right?
My bachelor's, yes.
Right. And so it's funny, and you said you didn't come here till you were 25, right?
I I do have a bachelor's from Bangladesh, so
Oh. Oh,
I have
okay.
two bachelors and one master's.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to say, a lot of like we live in a day and age too. Is a lot of like millennials, right? Think or Generation Z, or is it Generation Z, Generation X? I get that
I
so
think
confused.
Z.
Z, right?
Yeah.
We feel like well, I guess we're entitled, or we feel like things happen fast, right? And we want things to happen fast. But here you come, you don't get to the U.S. until you're 25, and then I'm assuming were did you spoke very little English, right?
I was fortunate to speak English pretty well.
Okay, and but you still come here to this country, and at 25, right? While some people live been here their whole life, and they still feel like they're in their early 20s. They feel still like they haven't accomplished as much, right? They still feel like, hey, I still on social media you see so many people have this, the nice cars, the house, and I think we all feel like we're just in a rush to have these things, right? And and in your case, it's never too late, right? Would you say that?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's never too late to. I started this startup when I was what 53.
Yeah.
So it's never too late to start something and change the world. Go for
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I think that's so powerful because it's like we feel like we're in a rush. We feel like we have to have it now, and it's not the case. It's great things really truly take time.
Exactly.
And so over the next 5 years, where do you see Zartech going?
Um, so our solution is fully baked, and the feedback we got from our customers is they really like it. So now it's growing. So next step would be once we have reached a target where we feel that now it's time to go and get some capital, raise capital, because without that we wouldn't
Right.
be able to have that what you call the hockey stick growth.
Yeah. No, that's impressive. And so for anyone that wants to get on to the Zartech platform, what website can they visit, or are you all on social media?
Yes.
Yeah.
So on our website is zartech.net/career. That's where we post our jobs. We have a couple of openings right now, so anyone interested can have a look in there.
Okay. Awesome. No. And then the one last thing I always ask this to all my guests: what advice would you give to aspiring entrepreneurs?
Uh, I would highly recommend that they have a very good business plan and then do a focus group to validate the idea and then move on. If this, based on that, move forward. Because I s- and you probably see this. There's a lot of companies who have startups that's out there, and when I look at their business module, I can't imagine how they're going to be raising capital. I'm sorry, making money.
Right.
Um, so that's the challenge. You have to first, if you have a software or a service that you're offering, you have to do the numbers first. In my case, I also made the same mistake. I did not do the financial modeling. So my advisor, one of the first things says, "Hey, Abu, you have not done a financial modeling that will say, okay, how much are you going to price your software, and what's your profit margin going to be?" So he said, "We need to whiteboard it out." So we spent 3 hours. He's did it, where he, based on the pricing, he broke it down line by line, added in all the cost, and came up with the numbers that will be helping us generate revenue and grow. So I would definitely say do a financial modeling on your idea of what you're offering and make sure the numbers make sense.
No, very well said. Hey, Abu, really appreciate you taking the time to speak with me today. Really appreciate it. Thanks again. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
No problem.